Mari Silbey of US Ignite is going to be the moderator. Mari, come on out a minute, would you please? Give it up.
Oh, look, there it goes. I'm so happy to be back here at SCTE Cable-Tec Expo. It's kind of like coming home for me. But I am now here representing US Ignite. And if you're not familiar with us, we are a nonprofit out of DC that works to accelerate the smart city or smart community movement, specifically by working across the government sector. So think municipalities, think states, think regions, think federal agencies, as well as industry, including the cable industry. We have a number of cable partners. And then also in the academic community, because there's a lot of research and innovation that is happening there. So I'm very excited, and we have a great panel coming out, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a moment, because everybody's titles and places changes on a fairly regular basis.
Bill McGuire. Okay.
I think we might be the opposite here.
Oh.
I think we might...
Okay.
Go the other way.
There we
There we go.
Okay. All
Get
right.
it?
Musical chair.
I don't have the technical rehearsal.
There we go.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. I'm very excited to have a panel here. It's quite a mix of cable operators as well as their city partners. So these are actually partnerships that are happening on the ground today that are very successful from a smart cities perspective. We also have Bill McGuire from the NCTA, who's here to give us a little bit of that perspective. As I mentioned, but right before we go into the conversation, I'm going to have everybody introduce yourselves and then also give a little bit about the role that you play in your organization and perhaps how you connect to somebody else here up on stage. So Susan?
Thank you, Mari. I'm Susan Anable, Vice President of Public and Government Affairs for Cox Communications in our Southwest region in Phoenix. Also have Las Vegas and Tucson in our region. And my connectivity to the Smart Gigabit Community Project with US Ignite was from the government affairs side of bringing together our municipal partners into the opportunity. Since my government affairs team had those relationships and connections, it was the natural fit. So I'm a little bit of an outlier, not on the technology side, but more on the community partnership side.
But nonetheless, Cox has been such a champion for the work that the cities are doing for several years now and really has been on the front lines. So appreciate that. Alison?
Hi, I'm Alison Barlow. I'm the Executive Director of the St. Petersburg Innovation District. It's a public-private partnership in St. Petersburg, Florida, and we are also the lead agent for the city of St. Petersburg on smart cities. And the way we got connected with US Ignite was actually through their grant application process for the smart gigabit communities. We really wanted to be involved, try to test out some ideas and see what could happen. And through the connection to US Ignite, we got connected to Charter Communications. And so working with them on a couple of different projects, which we'll talk about, I'm sure.
Great. Dom?
Great. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Dominic Papa. I'm the newly appointed Vice President for the Smart State Initiative at the Arizona Commerce Authority. Prior to that, or also with that, I'm also the Executive Director and founder of the Institute for Digital Progress. It's an innovation-driven nonprofit organization whose sole focus was to help accelerate the development of smart cities in the greater Phoenix region. And we were actually the innovation partner with Cox Communications and US Ignite as a smart gigabit community initiative.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bill McGuire. I'm founder of Connected Communities Consulting. Last year, I had the opportunity, working with NCTA and its members, to really dive into this question of the potential partnerships between local communities and their cable providers and the synergies that are there. So I'm pleased to share with you all some of those findings and some of the next steps that we're thinking about with respect to sort of an application-focused view of smart and connected communities as opposed to just a device and equipment view. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Satya Parimi. I'm the Group Vice President for Enterprise Products and Smart City Solutions. Within Spectrum, I work with most of our functional teams across engineering, government affairs, product, to define the strategy for Spectrum around smart cities. I also work very closely with external partners across various cities to start educating them and informing them about what's possible in the smart city space. So we do a lot of trials, proof of concepts, and we do a lot of discussions with cities on what can we do to get them started. And through the Smart Gigabit program, we're partnered up with Alison Barlow and the Innovation District from St. Pete. We've got off to a great start earlier this year, and we'll talk more about all the great fun things we're doing as part of this program.
That's great. Well, thank you, everyone. I want to start, one of the things that I think about when I think about smart cities is that we are using communications networks to digitally connect the physical world. But I want to start maybe with either Dom or with Alison to get your thoughts on how does connecting the physical world actually help to solve community problems? How does it make citizens' lives better? Bonus points for any specifics.
You go first.
Alison, go ahead.
Sure. So when we started the project back in January, we had been talking about it for a couple of years, but really sat down to seriously plan. The first question we started with was not actually the technology, but actually what was going on in our community. We had a lot of interesting strategies, conversations, problems, convenings, all kinds of things that every community has. So we laundry listed all of the issues that we had, and we actually did have the tech folks sitting at the table with us while we were doing that. And issues that came up were things like Florida has the highest number of pedestrian and bicycle deaths in the US. We're a coastal community. As a city, we are surrounded on 3 sides by water. We're a peninsula on the giant peninsula of Florida. So coastal adaptation, coastal resiliency, the effect of storms, all of that was important to us. Like many communities, we have issues with a digital divide, having Wi-Fi access, or then even if we have Wi-Fi access, do people know how to maximize the use of those capabilities to make their lives better? We have kids that are coming home with laptops loaned from the schools, but can't necessarily get on them and have to go to a rec center or another place. So we listed all of those issues, and that was the cornerstone of the conversation. Then came the fun part to say, well, what could we employ in the smart city arena that might make something better, or could help get us smarter even about just the issue itself through sensor data, through different projects, and that led to our project selection.
That's fantastic. And maybe I'll take a little bit different approach. So, of course, we definitely want to be very outcome-based, but I think what the true impact that it's having is on the disruption that smart cities in this kind of technology is having with internal government and governance. And so what we're really seeing is the disruption of local government right now. So traditionally, cities would approach a project very siloed, but with the smart city approach and all the outcomes that she's mentioned, it's really disrupting your traditional bureaucracy of your local government. It's no longer a housing project. It's no longer a transit project. It's no longer a parks and recreation project. This technology and this way of thinking is actually obliterating the departmental silos. And so what we're really starting to see, especially within the city of Phoenix, is this breaking down silos, building up partnerships to attack these critical issues in a more holistic and partnership view. And so, one of the special things that we're thinking about now is City of Phoenix recently was awarded a large amount of money to build an affordable housing project. And typically in the past, the housing department with the City of Phoenix would take the money, build the housing complex, and walk away. Well, now, because of this new way of thinking, it's no longer a housing project. It's a connectivity project, right? It's an access project. And how can this one affordable housing unit solve so many of the challenges that the people living in this unit face on a day-to-day basis, right? Connectivity, access, knowledge. And so what I really love about the space that we're in now, it's what I call Smart Cities 3.0. Smart Cities 1.0 was technology-led, 2.0 was government-led, 3.0 is partnerships, right? And so the disrupting of government, and especially local government through unique partnerships like partnership with Cox and a partnership with UX Ignite are really starting to drive culture change within local government, and it's starting to be able to allow us to accelerate the outcomes that she mentioned earlier.
I'm really curious because I saw Parimi smile there as well. Does that resonate with you? I mean, as you are going into, that sounds like a fantastic outcome, that municipalities aren't working in silos anymore, that there's a lot more partnership and districts and regions. Is that what you're seeing from the outside?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dom's reading off my script, but I think what he highlighted is very key. I think the technology exists, the willingness to deploy is there, Of course, the two big challenges we've seen over the last few years has been the business case, financial model to do this at scale. There are ways around that, and there's a lot of discussions around private-public partnerships, and I think there's a path to eventually get there. The bigger issue, I think, is around the silos versus partnerships. Even if through some form of magic, you get your own smart city, do the cities know how to use them, right? And I think a lot of the challenges come from, as Dom mentioned, the silos, right? The power through all of these smart cities is the amount of data that's generated. And when you do a lot of these projects in silos, you're not able to take advantage of the vast amounts of data that are being generated. As you said, as an example, you could do a smart light project which would be driven by one department. But if you get data from that smart light pole by putting additional sensors, there are other departments that could use, from public safety to security services. And all of those are only possible if the departments in the city are all aligned around what it is they want to do, and they're willing to share information and processes across them. And I think, yes, I don't know, Dom, if you coined 3.0, I don't know if it's a thing now, we're going to call it Smart City 3.0, but partnerships are absolutely key, not only within the city, but also the cities have to reach out to partners like, service providers like ourselves to work this out, because I don't think, one entity can make it happen.
So that's a great lead-in, and gosh, you must have been on the panel prep call ahead of time. So partnerships are great, and aligning internally is incredibly important, but we're also talking about a major industry shift for the cable industry. I mean, if you look at the heritage here, you're talking about franchise agreements and some contention often, but we're really looking at those relationships starting to evolve. And I'm curious to hear, and maybe Susan, we'll start with you, since you're doing it so successfully, what is the path forward for other cable operators that are looking at these types of partnerships? What's the model that you would give them, and how do they get to where you are from where they are?
Sure. Well, and I think it's fair to say I don't think we had a preconceived notion of where this was ultimately going to head, but 4 years ago when we had a conversation with US Ignite about potentially sponsoring a city in one of our regions to be a member of the US Ignite Smart Gigabit Community Project, it became sort of a natural yes for us, looking at the reality that we have this robust network, we have the connectivity both for the business community, for our residents, for education, for healthcare, across the gamut. So we'd already sort of created this ecosystem to be able to leverage the technologies of smart communities. And so that was kind of the nexus that we came to the table with, is, okay, we're going to be connecting and we're going to be enabling all of this smart technology in these communities. But then I think over time, as in the last couple of years, we've come to realize there's more that we can do as a cable industry, there's more we can do as an operator than just being the network. There's a lot of these technologies and solutions we can help enable, either on our own or in partnership with other vendors. So that's been the evolution of, I think, of our own journey, looking at how do we play in the smart city space. But again, it really started as we're here, we have the network, we have the ecosystem, and it's really started to evolve.
Do you think that cable providers as a whole in different regions are getting to the right conversations and bringing the right people in at the city level or at the municipal level to have the conversations about how to evolve those partnerships? Is that, because again, the relationship used to be very different and you've had a very successful model, but I'm curious to hear from anybody else really on the panel as to whether or not cable has found the right path to sit down with the right people who are making those big strategic and holistic decisions.
Yeah, I think as the other cable provider representative on the panel here, I think both Tom and Bill spoke in the opening keynote about the key right now is around education, right? Making sure cities and communities and municipalities are aware about what is feasible and possible from a smart city technology perspective. That's one part of the equation. The second part is around making sure we become a trusted advisor for them. Right. So as they go along this journey of wanting to become a smart city, what is it that they could do, but at the same time also making sure they understand that as a cable provider, as Susan mentioned, we have the network already, right? And also, there are other things in addition to that we can do. As a large provider of scale, we can bring partners to the table. We have operational scale to implement some of these solutions and manage them. So I think the conversations, as long as they start around education and also listening to the cities on what it is they want. I'll speak for Spectrum. We're not really trying to tell cities, look, you should do this solution or this solution. I think, as Alison mentioned, each city has their own unique needs, right? So when we start with, hey, here's what's possible, we're here to partner with you. Let's talk about what it is you want to start with, because a lot of the success we've seen across the country always starts with not trying to do everything, right? Once there is alignment on what is possible and what the city wants, let's get small wins, right? And then we build on those small wins. And as Dom has shown, like in just Phoenix and now up to the state level, I think there is a progress and a path. And I think cable overall is having the right conversation. I think there needs to be more conversation, but I think we're off to a great start.
And I do want to hear a little bit more about some of the early conversations as both of these partnerships started to get engaged. But I want to bring Bill into the conversation as well and just get a sense from you in some of the research that you've done where you see entry points for cable. And it's going to be different for different cable operators and in different regions, but where are some successful entry points for cable in this space?
Well, it's not going to be a surprise to anyone in the audience, but embarrassingly, it was a surprise to me that the industry has had a really rapid expansion in the access to the homes. So by NCTA statistics in 2016, 4% of US homes had access to an advanced communication network. By December of 2018, that was 80%. So I don't think that many folks outside of the cable industry understand that, but more significantly, I don't think many folks within the sort of smart cities conversation understand the implications. Because largely, I think smart cities often boils down to equipment and almost specifically like intersections, right? Like places where lampposts go or smart meters of different types go. I think expanding the art of the possible and supporting Smart Cities 3.0 might be a recognition of the smart home as a place where local governments can deliver services in a way they're not thinking about it now, right? I was listening to Plume yesterday on this very stage talking about an interesting application that runs on Wi-Fi where the executive from Plume gets a notification when his father wakes up in the morning because the RF is disturbed. That's a really fantastic aging at home application. I don't think we yet, in this smart city conversation, understand all the implications of applications. We're thinking a lot about devices, but I think some of the most interesting conversations that the cable companies are having are with communities that are looking at how do we spend money more effectively and efficiently, and how can this partnership help us do that? So I'm excited about the direction of Smart City 3.0, as we're calling it, as it relates to this sort of smart home as a platform.
I have to say, in a different panel, in a different conversation, I would love to get into a little bit about how networks are going to be sensors unto themselves in the future and the things that you'll be able to determine and the data that you'll be able to get from that as a city. But that's a different topic, so we'll save that for another panel. In the meantime, I want to go back to sort of the overlap and how we merge those conversations that need to happen and what those first meetings are like between a city and a cable partner, because you're coming from such different spaces. I mean, cities are trying to get potholes fixed, is the fallback default conversation that happens. So, what happens when a city actually sits down with the cable provider, and what surprises maybe were there? And Alison, I'd love to start with you because I know you've gone through this process more recently, and then we'll look at Phoenix as well.
So I'm not a city employee. I work for the third-party public-private partnership, And when we saw the opportunity to do the grant application, started actually having conversations within our community about, did we want to pursue smart city technology? What were those issues and things like that? So for us, it took a year of internal conversations, of just getting people over that hurdle of, it's not Big Brother. I mean, there's a lot of misnomers, there's a lot of intimidating factors to it, and it's a lot of, part of what we were doing was trying just to get people excited about possibilities. So once we got through that and people were a little calmer about, hey, this is all gonna be kind of interesting, I think the first couple of conversations were literally, as I described, sitting down with our Spectrum Charter partners and talking about what do we each have that we want to bring together. I brought a lot of maybe unconventional partners to the table because my city wasn't going to be able to pull all of this off. And I knew that going in, they had already expressed that. So we brought in key departments within the city, and I totally agree about it has to be a holistic view of city government. But then we brought in nonprofits. We brought in our local hospitals. We brought in our local university and people like that. So our first couple of conversations with our Spectrum Charter folks was really about getting to know each other and them getting to know us. We took them on a tour around the city in our area and showed them kind of some of the places. They told us about capabilities and tried to explain to me how they're organized. To your point about,
it does change every 6 months. So
it does.
There's always a reorg.
But that's okay. I think that was one of the key things for us was we sort of identified me as our point person and on their side a couple of point people so that we had sort of this friend to phone.
Right.
Honestly, as we were having these initial conversations, if something popped up really fast and I was trying to address it within the city, I gave them a call and I said, this is what I'm hearing. Hey, can you help me think this through? So it was a lot of give and take. It wasn't just one meeting.
How important is that piece, Parimi, the one point of contact there?
I think that's phenomenal. I think I'll add to what Alison said and to your earlier question around how do these conversations with cities go, right? For a city of St. Pete, fairly large-sized city, as a service provider and a cable company, we cannot engage the community as a whole. We just don't have the connections or the skill or the scale. People like Alison and the organization she's part of, right, and the mandate she has been phenomenal because we would not have made even a tenth of the progress we've made without that, because getting everybody in the city to sit down and talk to us and then talk to the community and talk to the business community, that would have never worked. And also that's one of the learnings, we have US Ignite as a partner as well, and they helped with the process too. And that's something we're looking at actually as we look forward to, is when we engage cities, we're trying to find key stakeholders who already can actually help us do the groundwork for us. And I think that becomes very, very critical. Of course, with smaller cities, smaller communities, we have one-on-one conversations, and a lot of times it's about education and information sharing, but I think the real value and the real movement we see is when we have someone designated by the city that we can work very closely with. And the second part to this, and that's what from a cable perspective we're really interested is, Alison was able to bring in other non-governmental entities to the table, right? Yes, there's work on smart cities going on, but this is IoT technology, right? We would love to work with nonprofits, businesses, other commercial entities to try out some of these technologies or even deploy some of these. And I think having all the constituents there, I think is really, really critical. And I think that could be a model going forward, is where we have a champion from the city, sometimes from the government, or sometimes a nonprofit or a private-public partnership. And I think that moves the ball forward. Engaging directly with some of the larger governmental entities can take a lot of time.
It can. And just a little plug for US Ignite here, which is, our focus really is on going into these communities. We have, through the Smart Gigabit Communities Project, we have a network of almost 30 communities across the city, across the country. We also have, through our other programs, a web that extends much further. So being able to go in and find those
And I want to go back in a minute to a little bit more about what sort of cable may have to offer on the emerging technology side. But first, I do want to go back to Phoenix. And you know, a lot of times they talk about the pioneers are the ones with the arrows in their backs, right? And yet you guys have you really have paved the way for cable companies to come behind you in a very successful path. So take us back a few years to when that started and what that looked like, and you know, either Susan or Dom, how did that begin?
Well, I'll start, and
definitely.
then Dom can add to the story. Dom and IDP has been a wonderful partner, and I would say the key to the success with our City of Phoenix project has been a really engaged partner with Dom and his team. But when we started, I don't think anybody really knew how this was going to work. I mean, it was all new to us. The city had decided to utilize a smart app hack as a way to identify their first couple of technologies that they wanted to tackle with the project, which worked great. But it was really what happened after that, and credit to Dom, that they really started to look at this more holistically with other partners in the room, like Arizona State University, and looking beyond the boundaries of City of Phoenix. And I would say is that the progress we've made from the initial days with the City of Phoenix and this project, it is now really evolved into a smart region and now even a smart state effort, as Dom alluded to earlier. So it was a little clunky as we got going, but once we hit the ground, it just opened up so many more doors and so many more opportunities. And it really shone a light on the fact that you need to have partners beyond the geographic boundaries of the city when you're dealing with a large metropolitan area, which is the case in the City of Phoenix. I'll let Dom add to that.
No, that's perfect, and I think Susan hit on a good point. So I mentioned Smart Cities 3.0, but I'm going to throw one more at you. It's Smart Region 1.0 is what we're seeing right now. So, you know, I'm actually a recovering city employee. So I used to work for the City of Phoenix, and we tried to do a lot of this effort internally, and we just struggled to get anything going up and off the ground ourselves. Bureaucracy, policy, red tape, we just struggled to get anything going. And it was at that time that we had a chance to look out at the region and say, okay, how are other smart cities around the world doing all these big projects? What we realized is they had some organization that sat in the community that could help drive technology and innovation forward from the outside in. So we took a look around the greater Phoenix region. Do we have anything like that? No, and so that's why I started the nonprofit in the first place, to provide that mechanism that would allow the governments the ability to launch technology applications in their communities. So we started the nonprofit, partnered with Cox and the City of Phoenix to really start to move these smart city efforts forward. It was at that time we realized that City of Phoenix wasn't the only one challenged with getting these smart city projects up and off the ground. Our neighboring cities, Tempe, Scottsdale, Glendale, Chandler, they were all struggling to launch these technology projects as well, right? Sometimes the business model just doesn't make sense when you're looking specifically within your city. So it was at that time we really had the chance to sit back and say, okay, how can we really accelerate our efforts? And what we realized is that our competitive advantage is who we were as a region. 4th largest county, fastest growing in population, #1 largest public research institution in ASU, #1 largest community college district in the country. We have 22 jurisdictions all slammed up right next to each other in this greater Phoenix region. To Susan's point, what if we could get those 22 jurisdictions to think together, act together, innovate together, and procure technology and infrastructure together? Could we create a smart region and outscale everyone else that's focused on specific city levels? Could we build the economies of scale, the purchasing power that will enable all of those cities to really launch these applications and get them moving forward? And so we started to have these conversations, and Cox was the perfect partner. The cable company was a perfect partner to have at the table because their network was all across the region. And so they're the ones that could really take a holistic view at scale and say, could we drive these technologies forwards together? And the answer was yes. And so we've officially launched the Smart Region Consortium back in November, which is the 22 jurisdictions. It's ASU and it's industry partners like Cox Communications to help drive this smart region approach. But we really feel that it's going to be the game changer because Susan's right. Challenges don't stop at municipal boundaries, right? We don't want to speed traffic up through the City of Phoenix to have it come to a dead halt in Tempe. So we really need to look at these solutions as a region, and we really think that the partnership with Cox is going to enable us and empower us to do that because they've got the network to power it. So we're really excited about where we're at.
I got to say, the cable industry is so excited to hear you touting their network, because that is certainly a huge, huge advantage that cable brings to the table. But along those lines, what is the go-to-market for cable at this point beyond the network? Because the network is there and it continues to be reinforced and it continues to grow. But what are the things that cable is now trying to do to grow in this space from a platform or a strategic or a application perspective? What are the things that cable has to offer to the cities as you're having some of these new conversations?
Yeah, I can start off. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it starts with becoming a trusted advisor for the city, right? So the education, the information up front is all critical. We continue to do that. In addition to that, we have the network. I think there's a lot of mention of network here, not just wired. I'll do a plug for wireless as well. We have some of the best Wi-Fi assets. We have LTE now. We also have CBRS trials going on. So there cannot be a smart city without the network, and we have some of the best network assets that are out there. On top of that, when we talk to a lot of the cities, we hear about, this is great, but I'm a city or a region, and I'm not a system integrator. I can't put this together myself. And I think that's where, as a cable industry, because we have the technology and the scale to do it, the key is to bring the partners together, especially from a vendor perspective. As a cable provider, we're not going to create the sensors for detecting motion, for example. There's other people who do a very good job at that. But we can bring sensor vendors, we can bring software and analytics vendors together, and we can be that system integrator, right, to put the whole solution together. Again, talking with cities, it's not always cut and dry on are we creating the entire solution and just dropping it with them. Sometimes they want to be engaged and involved. But I think we help with getting over the hurdle of, I can't put the pieces together, can you help me with it? Now that's the second hurdle. Now you have a solution created. Now the question becomes, how do you deploy this? Right? Who's going to climb poles, get on top of buildings and deploy all these? Again,
not me, by the way. I'm not going to be doing that climbing.
Not either.
So as you're aware, we have the operational scale and reach to do it, and we can get things up and running either directly with us, or again, we can bring partners there as well. That's the next step. And beyond that, you still have to run this network, right? So we think, cable thinks in terms of infrastructure that we put in for 10, 15 years, right? And that's what smart cities need. So I think from a cable perspective, we become a very natural partner. I can't see of any other industry that can bring all these values together with the city. We can play a complete role, end-to-end role, or we can do part of it based on what the city wants. But I think having cable as a partner, a cable provider as a partner, is one of the best paths a lot of the cities can go down to ensure success, right? We're not talking about, hey, do we want to do a quick trial or proof of concept on a street corner or along a stretch of downtown. That's what everybody's been working on, right? And to get to scale, to get to production, you need somebody with scale and the operational capability to do it. And I think, Dom, to your 3.0 partnership, maybe 4.0 is massive wide deployment. But I think the ingredients are all coming together, and we would like to see much larger scale deployment of these solutions.
Agreed. So it's a friendly audience, so I'm sure everybody will agree with you that cable is the perfect partner. I think there's probably some out in the industry who might say there are some other folks vying for that role, for sure. What would make it easier, and I'm going to turn this question around in a moment, but what would make it easier for cable companies? What can cities do that would make it easier for you to go in and partner with them? And then we'll switch it around and ask from a city perspective, what could cable providers do to make it easier for them to partner with you? So Susan, do you want to start?
Sure. So I think some out-of-the-box willingness to be creative about use of assets that are in the right-of-way. If it's going to be deploying new technology, whether it be sensors or whether it be a requirement that we have to put some additional equipment out in the public right-of-way to enable some of this technology, is having cities that are willing to allow that to happen. I mean, and I don't mean this disparagingly, but sometimes you're operating in an environment where there's a certain bureaucracy about the way things are done, that if cities aren't willing to think more broadly and more creatively around that and be willing to try some things and kind of clear some of the traditional regulatory and bureaucratic obstacles, then they're not going to progress very far. So I think it's really key that a city sort of adopts a very progressive and open mindset to how to enable the technology, and then being able to stand up, defend it, and communicate and educate the public around it so that they feel confident in what's being deployed as well. So it really, really takes a city that is forward thinking that way.
On the city side, I mean, and Parimi, you're welcome to weigh in, but I also, on the city side, I'm curious, what would you say in response to that? What should the industry be doing to make it easier for you?
Well, I totally agree with what you said, completely, because I do think that we get caught up in the bureaucracy and the way we've always done it. What I think is so important from a partner perspective, and I have to give credit to the Spectrum team, is the willingness to take their ideas and morph them with our feedback. So there were a couple of ideas that came in and I said, okay, let me tell you what just happened in City Council and why this timing on this project may not be the right one. And so that whole give and take, the back and forth, we kind of push each other. We're like, well, could we think about it in a different way? Could we come at it? I mean, even to the right-of-way question, we worked around the right-of-way issue because we knew we couldn't answer it fast enough. So we actually just got rid of the question and moved the polls that we're doing. So those kinds of things, and that's been great because the flexibility and the back and forth conversations. So I say to any providers who are looking to partner with cities, you're gonna have what you're really good at, and sometimes when you're really good at it, you get really excited about it, but also think about how you could even flex what you're really good at for that particular situation or that environment. And if the city people are telling you, hey, this isn't gonna work, certainly push on them because they may be caught in the way we always do things, but they may also have some really good little nuggets of situational awareness that you might not know about.
That's great. So from what do we want more from the cable industry? It's hard. Maybe I'll take a different view at this. We want your knowledge. So one of the things the city, the local government struggle with is, I mean, you have street engineers that have been there for 30 years, city managers that's been there for 25 years. They're so busy executing, they don't have time to keep up with machine learning, IoT, autonomous vehicles, right? And so what we really need is your knowledge of the industry and the technology, however, in a unique fashion. When I was with the city of Phoenix, industry partners would come in and spew all this technology at us and our eyes would glaze over, right? So it's not very conducive to just try to deliver all your knowledge in a 30-minute meeting. No, what about, partnering with local nonprofits or whatever the mechanism might be and offering like workshops, network workshops, so that way these city staff can come in, on a neutral basis and learn this technology and gain the knowledge from you. I really think that's kind of the key. What we're looking for is that deep technical knowledge that the cable industry has, and in a way to upskill our current public sector workforce, so that way if they're more familiar and comfortable with this knowledge, they're more acceptable and they're more willing to deploy this technology. And so unique ways to deliver your knowledge to local government, public sector workforce.
Mari, maybe I could take just a minute and discuss or address any skeptics in the group. So, I think it might be easy to conclude that Alison and Dom represent communities that are outliers in their commitment and enthusiasm for this space. But in my work with Connected Communities, I run a Smart City 101 workshop. And so far, more than 200 local government representatives have come through that workshop. And one of the things we do first is we try to define the undefinable term of smart city. And I think we would all agree that this is a buzzy term that has a lot of different meanings. But I would posit to the providers in the room that the buzz is part of the opportunity. And the evidence that I'd suggest, the hardest evidence of that is JP Morgan, not a technology provider that I'm aware of, launched an Advancing Cities initiative last year. They received 250 applications from 143 different communities in more than 40 different states. They received 1,800 inquiries. So the scale of enthusiasm and interest around this topic, the number of mayors and city councils that have determined they're not going to be running a dumb city is basically endless. So there's opportunities to re-envision, reimagine these partnerships. It's a strength that Cable has such a long-standing relationship with these communities, but there is an opportunity here maybe to turn the page a bit and start afresh on how initiatives can be co-created in partnership. So hopefully there are no skeptics, but just in case there might be a skeptic, I think the evidence suggests that this enthusiasm is widespread.
Well, I know there's some reporters in the audience, so there are definitely some skeptics there. So hopefully that brings a different perspective. We are running so short on time, and so I'm going to have to skip ahead to some other things. But I do want to hear about some of the success stories in the last couple minutes that we have, because there are some things happening on the ground that are really exciting. Dom, I know you mentioned the housing project that you have coming up. Alison, I'm hoping you can touch briefly on the marine science project, because that's just so much fun.
Okay. So I mentioned earlier that we are a coastal community, and so coastal resiliency adaptation is really important to us. And it was interesting in that first couple of meetings when we listed all of our issues, that was one of our core issues. And as we talked it through, we figured out, and this was one of those, we never had it on our radar that this was an idea, but we figured out that we could leverage, we have one of the largest concentration of marine scientists in the Southeast US in our city, and specifically in our innovation district. We have a community of young people, youth, who many of them are economically disadvantaged and actually have not spent much time on the water. And how do we connect our young people to our marine scientists out in the field, on ships, using underwater drones, tracking sensor data in our Tampa Bay, which is around current, water, temperature, salinity, things like that. So we've actually developed with Spectrum a marine science STEM education project, and are working right now on creating a really cool portal that's going to bring in all this data. And it's been really fun to partner with Spectrum on this one, because early on I said, this may be out of your bailiwick. This just may not be your core mission. And I get that. And they got on board, totally on board. In fact, some of their staff have created really cool possibilities that we didn't even think about. We're gonna sink an underwater reef, and they were like, let's put a camera on it so the kids can watch what's going on with the reef. So we actually, in my office right now, have a dummy underwater reef with a camera in a fish tank that we're practicing and testing all this stuff out. But that's the kind of fun stuff that really has come up through the partnership, and I wouldn't have even considered it on my list.
Fantastic. Anything you want to add, Dom, further down the line?
No, that's great. One thing we're looking at is the redevelopment of our downtown park. It's our central park in Phoenix, Hance Park, and we're trying to figure out how do we build, the world's first smart and connected park. How does it not only serve as a place to recreate, but also how does it address homelessness? How does it address some of these other social issues that we're facing, and how do we do that through technology and partnership? So we're redeveloping our downtown park to be kind of the smartest and most connected park in the country.
Well, I don't think we've solved all the problems about how to make dumb cities smarter. There are no dumb cities. Everybody's a smart city. But hopefully we've extended the conversation a little bit farther, and you have some ideas to walk away with in terms of how cable and cities can partner together in the future to create smarter cities, smarter states, smarter regions, and probably a smarter country across the whole nation. So please help me in giving a warm round of applause to the panel.